Hey, IGN fans, here's an exclusive look at a new clip from Superman.
Target in sight.
He's back. You're 5 o'clock.
Copy.
12C. 18A. 34B. 98Z. 8H. 74D. 4014.
Here, that was an exclusive clip from Superman, James Gunn's Superman. I am joined today by Jim Vejvoda, one of our entertainment leads. More relevant, though, Jim also reviewed Man of Steel for us back in 2013.
Certainly did, Tom.
I wrote our review for James Gunn's Superman. We're going to get into that in a little bit, kind of comparing those reviews and our thoughts on those movies. But let's first start by talking about that very cool clip.
Yes.
It's Lex sort of commanding the Hammer of Boravia in combat against Superman. What'd you think of that clip, Jim?
I really enjoyed it. It's to me, it captures a lot of the energy and the fun and the overall vibe of what Gunn is going for in this movie. It kind of really encapsulates his approach to the particular kind of action style he's going for in this movie. It's a little different than the style he did in the Guardians films. And yeah, I just thought it really kind of, and it gives you a good idea of Lex Luthor as well, his personality, his kind of scheming that's going on. And yeah.
He always wants to be like one step removed from the fight. He doesn't want to get up in there. He wants to kind of be calling the shots. He's going around. I noticed he's like
literally calling the shots.
He is calling the shots. He's calling it 5A, 6C.
Yeah.
It seems that he's been studying Superman and has sort of prepared these fight moves, or has worked with the Hammer of Boravia to sort of get ahead of what Superman is going to be fighting like. Something I really appreciate about what the action here looks like, it's kind of dirty. You see here, you're getting these very close-up shots of Superman as he's kind of going through the sky. The light is kind of cutting in and kind of flaring here. It makes it feel a little bit more real, a little more lived in.
Yeah, it does make you feel like you are in the middle of Metropolis and you're observing something going down. I think there's also, a sense of... even the texture there, the way the sun is going through his cape and everything. There's just, there's so many nice little touches. And I can only imagine the sheer number of hours the VFX artist did to just perfect every little bit of light, all of everything just kind of matches.
Not to mention David Cornsweet probably being in a wire rig for hours and hours and hours of his life.
Yes.
Oh man, the nausea there is probably pretty bad. I think the fight that this is probably the most close to in terms of what we've seen from Superman before on screen is the final battle from Man of Steel between Superman and Zod over the skies of Metropolis, and kind of bashing into buildings and stuff like that. How do you think these two scenes compare?
I mean, yes, there are similarities, but there was obviously big tonal differences and a sort of what each scene is trying to say. Like the Man of Steel sequence is about menace. It's about basically almost like an apocalyptic kind of thing, like the aliens have arrived and they're here to conquer you. This one is far more of a comic book kind of vibe. It's, you could almost see the splash page. You open up a comic book and the different panels and, the intercutting of that. So it's definitely meant to be fun in a way that the Man of Steel battle over the skies of Metropolis was meant to be a bit more awe-inspiring, a bit more tension, obviously grim, but a sense of I guess menace.
I think there is, it's important from a story perspective here to remember that in Man of Steel, that was the first time Earth was ever seeing aliens, and that was being played out, in Metropolis, destroying buildings. That was our first experience of like, this is what we get when we bring, Kryptonians to Earth.
Right.
Whereas in Superman, and I think we're safe to say this clip is from fairly early on in the
it's pretty
movie,
early.
and we are very used to having not aliens necessarily, but metahumans are around at this point.
Yes.
And that's one of the things that Gunn's Superman does differently, is that this is an established world that we're stepping into. And I think that probably does speak to why there's less. This is more an everyday part of life.
Yeah, and Superman is this isn't a spoiler, he's the only alien, he's the first alien on Earth that they know of. And so metahumans in and of themselves have been around 300 years at this point. So yeah, people are used to there being wacky things happening in the world. But a guy who's, an alien among us is different. We should say that the world of James Gunn's Superman is meant to reflect the comic books more than reality. It's not. It's like, whereas the Zack Snyder verse, as fantastical as it was, they were trying to ground it more in a realistic, like, what if aliens arrived and went storming through New York, basically.
Yeah, because and it's important to put Man of Steel into the context of when it was released. It came out in 2013, just after the Dark Knight trilogy. Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy had wrapped up, and Warner Brothers was looking for, like, okay, well, how do we replicate the success of Batman with Superman? And at the time, the move seemed to be, let's keep it grounded in that what if. A lot of what happens.
Christopher Nolan was an exec producer, and I think David Goyer may have been one of the writers. I don't know.
They definitely wanted to try to replicate that magic. My point being, though, that like the Dark Knight trilogy, the whole thing that made that attractive was the idea of like, this Batman could exist, or we're only about 10% off of a world where this Batman could exist. And that was the ethos of Man of Steel, I think. Like, if Krypton had been real, and if the last son of Krypton had come to Earth, Man of Steel is kind of what story we would have expected.
It was basically a sort of like the movie Starman a bit, but on steroids.
Yes.
And like and they were trying to differentiate themselves tonally from the then just burgeoning MCU. I mean, the Avengers had only come out the year before. Right. The MCU was not a sure thing at that point, like until Avengers came out. And I think it's also important to note in 2013 I think that was the year Iron Man 3 and Thor: The Dark World came out, two movies that proved divisive amongst fans. So again, the context of when Man of Steel came out, it was offering something different than what Marvel was attempting to build.
Now, we've been talking about Man of Steel a lot here, and I promised everybody that we would talk about our reviews here. Now, you reviewed Man of Steel back in 2013 when it came out. I'm gonna do what we always tell people not to do, which is I'm just gonna read the verdict of the review here.
Jumping right to the score.
Exactly, And you had given it a 9. You said action-packed, briskly paced, and featuring a stellar cast. Man of Steel is the best Superman film since the 1978 original, and proves DC can match Marvel in the massive scale department. While it could have used a bit more levity, Man of Steel is nevertheless director Zack Snyder's best film to date.
Yeah, he was coming off Sucker Punch. So, I mean, come on.
It was an easy enough call.
And I mean, I don't know, like, if I thought he had, at that point in time, he really needed a good script to match his visual style. And, I just, at the end of the day, that movie, at that moment in time, I enjoyed it. And I think it was a film that, to me, I was reacting to where the Superman franchise had been at that point. We were coming off of Superman Returns, which a movie I like, but obviously was not successful enough to continue that
fork
take
of
on
Superman on screen.
Yeah, and it was
continuing
still
the Donner
yeah, it was
continuity.
still tied to right down to casting a guy who looked like Christopher Reeve,
Yeah,
and
Brandon
like
Routh.
I loved Brandon Routh as Superman.
He's very good as Superman.
But and I love that they brought him back in like Crisis on Infinite Earths there on TV and everything.
But people forget that Superman, before Man of Steel, we hadn't gotten the true power
Yeah.
fantasy of Superman.
We
on
had.
screen
I mean,
before.
look, the closest we got. I grew up with the Chris Reeve movies. I love them, flaws and all. But the first Superman movie, he's fighting a guy in a leisure suit. The second one, he finally fights Kryptonians, but they're all in like disco gear, and they're all pretty skinny.
Yeah.
So this was the first time you really get him like a comic book thing where he's fighting big bads, and there's you're flying through the air, and you're getting the comic book that you wanted.
Yeah.
Before that, it's guys in leotards. Like the closest we got was Nuclear Man in Superman 4. Okay, like that was as good as you got.
And do you feel like kind of now you've kind of gone back and you've read your review, reread your review? Do you feel like, and reviews are always a snapshot in time,
Yeah,
right? Do you feel like that sort of still kind of coalesces your feeling about that movie?
Given the context of where I was coming from, there was no BVS. That wouldn't be announced, I think, until Comic-Con the year later. In that moment in time, that's how I felt about it. And look, you as a critic, you're married to that thing for life.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's like it's like putting a suggestive selfie of
The
yourself
5
online.
that I gave
It's there
Transformers
forever.
1 is burned onto my forehead. Trust me, I know.
So you're married to it, and and I stand by my review. But context is everything.
Yeah.
And it began a sort of cinematic future for DC that we weren't sure what we were going to get, but Zack Snyder was a very hot commodity at that time. He was coming off of 300, which basically
massive
put
box office
Comic-Con
hit.
on the map,
Yep.
and he had Christopher Nolan's blessing.
Yeah.
And so, like, look, what
Not
was
to
not to
mention
like?
Watchmen.
Yes,
Yeah.
and Watchmen and everything. So there was a lot of there was a lot going for it. That there was a lot of promise there. I will say, I point out in my review that I didn't like the lack of levity.
Yeah.
I always
That's no problem in James Gunn's Superman. There's a lot of levity.
No, there's plenty of and there's plenty of drama to in it. But I will say, like, I pointed this out in my review. There's that scene in Man of Steel where Lois Lane asks Superman, like, what's the S stand for? And I'm paraphrasing here, but it's in my culture, it stands for hope.
Yeah.
And he's got a little smile on his face. I wanted more of that. I mean, he definitely showed in that scene he was capable of it. I wasn't asking him to be the whackety schmackety do Superman, but I really liked that moment in the fact that he cracks a smile. He was charming, and and Henry Cavill is capable of that. But the whole series became increasingly just so serious after that. And that's a different conversation, but like at that moment in time, I thought we were going to get more of that in the
Exactly.
future.
It's hard to sort of judge. It's so hard now to sort of think about Man of Steel only on its own, not with the context of what was to follow.
Yeah, it's really tough to like. It'd be like just trying to talk about, I don't know, Captain America, the First Avenger, or Thor 1, and like you look back, Thor 1 doesn't really hold up that well, but you're thinking, well, we get Ragnarok eventually, and the Fat Thor and all that, and
you never know what you're going to get until you kind of hang with the cinematic universe. And we saw what DC did following Man of Steel, and there are a lot of people that love it, a lot of people that are a little lukewarm on it. I would kind of put myself in that camp. I really do enjoy Man of Steel. I do sort of think that's still one of the highlights for that run.
Yeah, I think it showed a potential that wasn't reached in terms of sort of a poetic quality, or like there's some really beautiful imagery in that. There's some beautiful music in that. Nice performances. I mean, there are plenty of choices, and every director gets to do that, right? Like James Gunn makes certain choices in this movie that I'm sure some fans won't like. But that's fine. That's the filmmaker has to have their own spin on the material. And there were choices that Zack Snyder and the writers made on Man of Steel, whether it's, you know, what happened to Zod at the end or Jonathan Kent's kind of life lessons to Clark. You know, we didn't really, you know, those were choices that were made. They were bold choices at the time, and you can totally feel like they were wrong choices. you know, that is your prerogative as a viewer, but it's also the artist's right to be able to make choices and tell the story they want to tell. And the audience can either like it or reject it.
Yeah.
And
well,
you know,
we're about to see what the audiences are going to feel about James Gunn's Superman. I'm very excited to see what everybody thinks about it. Again, I gave it an 8. I really enjoyed it. I think you will as well.
I liked it too.
And we can like both Man of Steel and Superman at the same time. It's
I love
incredible.
Adam West's Batman and Nolan's Batman and
We contain
Matt Reeves'
multitudes.
Batman.
Jim, thank you so much for joining me to
Tom.
chat about
And thank you,
Superman. Had a
viewers.
great time talking to you guys today. Superman is out in theaters this Friday. Don't miss it. You can also go check out my review for the movie, which is live right now. And also keep an eye out for a little bit of spoiler talk from Jim and I coming up in the next few days. Don't miss that. And for everything else, you're already in the right place. IGN.
Target in sight.
He's back. You're 5 o'clock.
Copy.
12C. 18A. 34B. 98Z. 8H. 74D.